In Australia, free-to-air and pay TV broadcasters benefit from privileged access to Australian audiences. These broadcasters favour the cost-effective practice of broadcasting second-hand content purchased from overseas markets rather than paying for and broadcasting locally produced content. It can be argued that the Broadcasting Services Act, which stipulates minimum quantities of Australian content that these broadcasters are obliged to offer its audiences, both guarantee the survival of the Australian film and TV industry and compel the broadcasters to fulfil their end of the social contract with Australian audiences, offering them culturally relevant content. Traditional broadcasters now share their audiences with emerging subscription video on demand companies, SVODs, who at present do not share the same regulatory burden. If broadcasters are compelled to spend more on meeting quotas than their competition, they will point to this disparity when arguing their regularly put argument for deregulation. This would be a backward step for the Australian film and television industry and Australian audiences. There's a precedent in Europe for compelling SVODs to meet specific quota targets, with European Parliament imposing a 30% European title target on Netflix and Amazon in exchange for access to the European market. Despite recommendations from industry bodies, the Australian government has shown little interest in negotiating quota standards for Australian audiences and industry in exchange for access. It could be the case that unlike Europe, Australia does not present a significant enough market for SVODs to accept quota burdens as easily. At the present time, SVODs are eligible for government benefits such as the post-digital and visual effects and location offsets. This represents a missed opportunity to trade access to these schemes for a minimum local content commitment from these SVODs on their platforms.
55%, that is a local content quota by which all commercial free-to-air television licensees abide. Between the hours of 6 am and midnight, 55% of what they broadcast must be Australian-made. This practice can be dated back as far as 1961 and has been put in place to promote the role of commercial television services in developing and reflecting a sense of Australian identity, character and cultural diversity. By supporting the community's continued access to television programs produced under Australian control. However, with the introduction of SVOD and the incredible growth it has seen among Australian consumers, a new discussion has been opened up on the potential imposing of content quotas on foreign streaming services. More than half of Australia's adults are paying for subscription video on demand services, led by Netflix with 5.3 million subscribers, accounting for 42% of the total SVOD revenues. With the gap between free-to-air television subscriptions and that of SVOD growing ever slimmer, a case can be argued that the Australian institutions are at a disadvantage. A recommendation made by the Australian Directors Guild during a government inquiry into the matter is that SVOD services meet a 10% local content quota. This is 45% less than what free-to-air services have to abide by, and the Guild believes that it will help ensure that local industry will not be bulldozed by these foreign bodies. However, it has been almost 1.5 years since this inquiry, with no results released, with no indication on whether a quota will be enforced. Without a content quota for these services, Australian actor Richard Roxburgh has commented that the networks are saying it's not a level playing field. They have to provide local content and the streaming services don't have to provide that content, and that has a big impost on them. But their solution is to get rid of the Australian quota system altogether. Without this content quota being enforced on free-to-air TV, there will be no incentive for any Australian content to be produced domestically. As a small film and TV industry, the blow that would leave would be astronomical. Whereas if a reasonable content quota was enforced on these SVOD services, such as the 10% suggested, it would potentially ensure a far more desired outcome for everyone involved.